Good morning, everyone. We have just spiritedly completed the August monthly service for the mission headquarters in America, led by Bishop Fukaya, and I would like to thank you all for your sincere prayers. Also, the annual Children's Association service performance and convention was held yesterday, and unfortunately, although I was not able to participate, it is easy to imagine that it was heartwarming to see the children's sincerity and single-heartedness in performing the service, as well as to see them running around and playing and having fun, as children do. It is invigorating to think about it, and I feel uplifted by their spirit. With that feeling in mind, as I have been assigned to deliver this month's monthly sermon, I'd like to ask for you a few minutes of your time while I share with you some of my thoughts. When the bishop approached me with a request to deliver a sermon, I felt a bit apprehensive, to be honest. I wasn't sure if I felt humbled, honored, or simply intimidated by the idea of standing before the congregation and delivering a sermon, but alas, here I am. When I started thinking about all of the things that have come to pass, both personally and in the world more generally, since the last time I gave a sermon, which was just over 4 years ago, I had to stop and reflect. If you recall, at about that time, we were in the midst of the uncertainty and fear of the initial stages of the COVID-19 outbreak and the worldwide upheaval that followed, as well as the strife resulting from the calls for social justice that were taking place. I started to think back to those times, and I remembered a very distinct feeling of anxiousness about what I was seeing unfold, and wondering how could I possibly say something that was relevant and meaningful as far as it related to those uncertain times. It strangely feels like ages ago, however, and so after reflecting on a series of events that I experienced over the last couple of years since then, I believe that God the Parent has reminded me that having a mind of gratitude is foundational to furthering spiritual growth through a series of very splendid knots that were shown to me. As we are reminded in the instruction 4, God the Parent lets us know when we are misusing our minds by showing us illnesses and other challenging situations. In the book, A Glossary of Tenrikyo Terms, we find the following divine direction, quote, "In the absence of any knot, everything goes in one ear and out the other. You cannot listen or understand unless faced with a knot. Indeed, the shallowness of the human mind is such that unless we are without, we don't really appreciate what we have." If you would indulge me for just a moment, I'd like to ask you to join with me in a very brief exercise to try and feel God the Parent's blessings. When I count to 3, please slowly close your eyes, and as much as you are able, please take in a slow, deep breath and let it out equally slowly. Try to feel the air fill your lungs and feel the air leaving your body as you exhale. So if you would, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. That gives me goosebumps. This is so simple, and yet the most vitally important activity that we all do. In fact, roughly about 20,000 times each day. And it is something our bodies do as a normal function through the exquisite workings of God the Parent. A few years ago, I experienced firsthand how truly splendid this function is when I suddenly found myself waking up in the middle of the night, completely unable to take a full breath. It felt as if something was squeezing my lungs to prevent me from breathing. It was unnerving, to say the least, but it passed quickly, as if I dreamt it, and I laid in bed trying to make sense of what had just happened. And at that moment, I fell back to sleep. When it happened again, a couple of nights later, it didn't subside. It took 2 torturous weeks of sleepless nights before I finally got to see a doctor, and all the while I prayed every day for God the Parent and Oya-sama to give me strength. The curious thing about this time period, however, was that I was still able to do all the daily tasks that I needed to do. I was in no pain, so it was as if God the Parent was telling me that even if it took a little bit more effort, I was still being blessed to be able to move about freely. In other words, I still had reason to be grateful, even with my physical limitations. I was still able to do the morning cleaning, put up the offerings before service, go to work. In fact, I was essentially doing all the things that I did the same as before, just perhaps a little bit sleepier. Even driving from Sacramento to come to mission headquarters for a monthly service each month. It was eventually discovered that the cause for my breathing issues was that I was experiencing the effects of heart failure. It was a bit more serious than I had expected, as the doctor told me that although I didn't seem to be a candidate for heart failure, that my heart function was down to approximately 15%. And I was told that it was possible that my heart could stop at any time. All at once, I was faced with my own mortality in a very real sense. If the heart function falls to around 10%, then a heart transplant enters the conversation. Fortunately, it never got there. Needless to say, it was unsettling, but I felt, without a doubt, that God the Parent was guiding and protecting me because I was still alive. It was not easy to recognize at first, but there were still so many reasons to be grateful. We are taught in the divine directions that with human beings, the body is a thing lent by God, a thing borrowed. The mind alone is the truth of oneself. So long as we see the blessings that God the Parent provides for us, then we can learn to be satisfied. There's a little phrase that I like to say whenever something happens that might not be as I wish, or something happens that kind of upsets me. And I usually say it to be humorous. It's fairly useful, and it goes, "There are far greater tragedies in the world." I say this, and sometimes it gets a chuckle or a laugh in response, but it comes from the principle of the teaching of a thing lent, a thing borrowed. We all possess the ability to freely use our minds as we wish, whether it is to be spirited or dispirited, to be satisfied or dissatisfied. It seems to me that the mind that focuses on being grateful becomes better at finding reasons to be grateful. Put differently, being thankful, truly thankful, allows us to carry ourselves in a way that shows that feeling of gratitude in whatever we do. There is obviously, and unfortunately, no shortage of things that are happening in the world around us that are reasons for feeling sad or distressed. War, famine, natural disasters, and social upheaval, just to name a few. It is sometimes hard to understand the times that we live in. These circumstances, however, aren't unique to the times in which we live. One could even make a strong argument that the times in which we live now are far more comfortable than in times past. How blessed are we that we don't live in a place in which we have to worry about bombs falling on us, or the authorities coming into our place of worship and taking us away to jail, even though there are such places around the world this very day. When the teachings were first revealed through the mouth of Oya-sama, the world was experiencing dramatic changes that made some people question whether the world was descending into chaos or even ending. In the instruction 4, the Shinbashira reminds us that global pandemics and frequent natural disasters are all expressions of God the Parent's love for us and is guiding us so that we can replace our mistaken minds. God is trying to convey to us, through all of the things that are happening around us, to love and help one another and spread joyousness while maintaining the mind of gratitude. This is not to suggest that we should always be in a constant state of bliss no matter what occurs, or to not feel frustration from time to time, but to view events as a means to improve the way we see and recognize God the Parent's blessings more effectively each day. When we are focused on what our daily lives require of us and get caught up in the daily grind of life, it is so easy to miss how God the Parent's blessings guide and protect us. In a divine direction, we are taught, quote, "From now on, what you describe as bothersome will become bothersome. What you describe as bright will become bright. If you sweep mud away completely and have clarity, your mind has no need to worry. The reason you worry is that the mind is cloudy." End quote. The state of our minds influences how we perceive, and this may inhibit our ability to appreciate God the Parent's workings. Earlier this year, I was making final plans to return to Ojiba to attend the Oya-sama birth celebration service with my mother. She was not able to return to Ojiba for some years now for various reasons, but most recently because of the pandemic. She had been very much looking forward to returning to Ojiba and offering prayers at the home of the parent, but had a little apprehension because she would require a lot of assistance. I assured her that as long as she was with me, I would do whatever needed to be done to try to make the trip go as smoothly as possible. She is now in her mid-80s and doesn't get around as well as she used to, but we were counting down the days to when we were to leave. One morning, about a month before we were to leave, I was in my office checking some emails when I heard a rather loud noise come from her room. So I went to check to see what it was. When she opened the door, she was holding her left eyebrow above her eyebrow, and I could see that there was blood coming down her face. I was startled and immediately applied pressure and took her to an urgent care facility to get checked out. It was a blessing that it wasn't a very serious wound, but we were told to go to the hospital to get x-rays because she takes blood thinners for a heart condition she has. We went and everything came back normal, so we returned home, thankfully. I was thankful that the injury wasn't serious and didn't require any further treatment. About 3 weeks later, as we're approaching our departure date, I was updating some travel documents on my computer when my mother asked me to return her passport to her as she wanted to put it in her travel bag. When she moved towards me, she lost her footing and tripped and fell again. It happened in the blink of an eye. This time when she fell, she hit the crown of her head on the corner of my desk. I jumped out of my chair to try and catch her, but the damage was already done. She had a very large laceration on the top of her head and began bleeding somewhat profusely. I once again applied pressure with a towel and rushed her to the hospital. She was in obvious pain, but she never lost consciousness and was very clear-minded, so I was somewhat relieved. This occurred about 5 days before we were to leave. The emergency room doctor decided to have a CT scan and an MRI done, once again to check for any potential brain hemorrhaging or bleeding. This time, however, they found that she was indeed hemorrhaging blood from her brain and that she would need to be admitted to the hospital. However, what the doctor said next was really curious. She said that the location of the hemorrhaging didn't seem to be a result of her fall, but was caused by something else. They kept asking her questions, her name, her age, birth date, home address, just to check to see what her mental clarity was and make sure that she wasn't having a stroke or something. However, she answered quickly and seemed really clear-minded. She never lost consciousness, nor did she lose any of her physical mobility. In fact, if she didn't have that rather large cut on her head and some facial swelling, you might not have known that there was anything wrong. I asked the doctor about the results from the previous fall and whether or not something was missed. And she said that the previous brain scans were clear. That meant that sometime between the first fall and the second fall, her brain started bleeding. My mother mentioned to me that she had been doing service 6 times a day to pray for our church members, and also that in hopes that she would be able to return to Ojiba and attend the Oyasama birth celebration, as well as the Women's Association convention. She was really disappointed that she wouldn't be able to go, but I pointed out to her that if God the parent hadn't stopped her from returning to Ojiba, and she had gotten on that flight with her brain hemorrhaging, the high altitude, and the lack of medical care, there was no knowing what could have happened. It was because she prayed so earnestly, I believe, every day, that God the parent and Oyasama provided her with a truly wondrous blessing. Even through what appeared to be a severe knot, a tremendous knot, a wonderful blessing was shown. She has been slowly recovering her mobility and being blessed each day, so much so that she was able to happily attend the mission headquarters 90th anniversary celebration in June, and heartwarmingly and tearfully reconnect with so many people she had not seen in many, many years. What a wonderful blessing indeed. God the Parent's workings are truly omnipotent. I'd like to close my talk today by quoting from Reverend A.G. Ozaki. And he says, quote, "In this path, we are encouraged to accept illness and other troubles as flowers of the path. The knots of illness and other troubles represent opportunities for us to deeply appreciate and savor God the Parent's intention, to engage in calm self-reflection, and to let the Parent's guidance help us take great strides towards joy and brightness. Considering how such knots can help us make significant progress toward greater joy, we would be well advised to clearly understand, appreciate, savor, and apply to our lives the meaning of saying that illness and other troubles are something to be thankful for and are flowers of the path." With just under a year and a half until the 140th anniversary of Oyasama, let us think of the Japanese saying, the expression of 10 years, one knot. And let that anniversary, the 140th anniversary, Help us to keep the thought that the flowers of the path can bear wonderful fruit if we have the mind to see and appreciate them. Thank you very much for your kind attention.